There are things in life that should remain between you and God. We live in a time where people feel the need to share everything, every thought, every struggle, every victory. But wisdom tells us otherwise. Some things are meant to be kept close, protected, and guarded. Things number one, your deepest personal struggles. There are burdens in life that no one else can carry for you. There are wounds in the human heart that no one else can fully understand. Every person walking this earth carries struggles, battles fought in silence, tears shed in the dark. The weight of personal struggles is something that can feel unbearable at times, and in our desperation, we often seek comfort in the wrong places. We look for someone to understand, someone to sympathize, someone to tell us it's all going to be okay. But not everyone is meant to hear the details of your pain. Some struggles are not meant to be shared with the world. Some wounds are too deep for human counsel, and some trials are meant to be wrestled through in the presence of God alone. This is a hard truth to accept because we live in a time when sharing everything has become the norm. People post their emotions online. They share their struggles with anyone who will listen, but in doing so, they often invite the wrong kind of attention. They open the door to judgment, to gossip, to advice that leads them further away from healing rather than closer to it. The world is not a safe place for your deepest pain. There are those who will listen, but not everyone listens to help. Some listen out of curiosity, some listen to find fault, some listen only so they can repeat what you've said behind your back. This is why the Bible warns us to be careful with our words, to be slow to speak and quick to listen. When you share your burdens too freely, you risk placing your heart in the hands of those who will not handle it with care. There is another danger in oversharing your struggles. It can lead to a cycle of seeking validation from people rather than seeking healing from God. When you constantly talk about your problems with others, you may feel temporary relief, but you are not truly being healed. It becomes a pattern where you keep revisiting the same wounds. Instead of allowing God to bind them up, some people grow comfortable in their pain because it brings them attention. But attention is not the same as healing. True healing comes when you take your burdens to the only one who can lift them. The Bible tells us to cast our cares upon the Lord, for He cares for us. It does not say to cast them upon every friend, every acquaintance, every stranger willing to listen. It does not say to cry out to the world for understanding. It says to bring your cares to Him, for He alone can carry them. There is a story in Scripture about Hannah, a woman who was deeply burdened, longing for a child. She was in anguish, and in her pain, she did not run to the people around her for comfort. She did not seek their sympathy. She went straight to the house of the Lord, and there she poured out her soul before God. She wept in His presence, so much so that the priest thought she was drunk. But she was not speaking to men. She was speaking to God, and God heard her. That is the kind of faith we are called to have, a faith that does not seek validation from people, but seeks comfort from God, a faith that understands that no matter how deep the pain, no matter how heavy the burden, God is enough. He is the wonderful counselor, the one who knows your heart even when you cannot find the words to explain it. Some struggles are so personal, so intimate, that they are meant to be kept between you and the Lord. This does not mean you should never confide in anyone. God does use people to encourage and uplift. But you must be discerning. Not everyone is meant to hear your story while you are still in the midst of the storm. There are some things you should not share until God has fully healed you from them. There are testimonies that are not meant to be spoken until they are complete. If you speak too soon, you may open yourself up to doubt, criticism, or discouragement from others. Joseph in the book of Genesis learned this the hard way. God gave him a dream, a vision of his future. But he shared it too soon, and instead of encouragement, he faced jealousy and betrayal from his own brothers. They could not understand what God was doing in his life, and their response was not to support him, but to tear him down. He was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and endured years of hardship before the dream God gave him was fulfilled. There is wisdom in silence. There is power in keeping certain struggles between you and God. Some battles are meant to be fought in the secret place, in prayer, in fasting, in seeking his presence. When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, facing the greatest trial of his life, he did not run to the crowd. He did not share his sorrow with everyone. He went to a quiet place, knelt before his Father, and prayed. Even the disciples, those closest to him, could not fully comprehend the weight of what he was going through. That is why you must be careful who you share your struggles with. Some people will misunderstand, some will judge, some will offer solutions that are not from God, and some will even rejoice in your suffering. The enemy uses people to plant seeds of doubt, to shake your faith, to make you question if God is truly with you. If you tell the wrong person about your pain, they may lead you further into fear instead of leading you back to faith. But when you take your struggles to God, he will never betray your trust. He will never twist your words or use them against you. He will never respond with judgment or cruelty. He will meet you with mercy. He will comfort you in a way no person ever could. He will remind you that you are not alone, that he is working all things for your good, even when you cannot see it. There is peace in keeping some struggles between you and God. There is strength in seeking him first before seeking the counsel of others. And there is wisdom in knowing that not everyone is meant to hear the depths of your heart. God knows, God understands, and God is enough. Things, number 2, your good deeds and charity. When you do something good, when you extend a hand to someone in need, when you give, when you sacrifice, do not do it for the eyes of men. There is a temptation in human nature to seek recognition, to want others to see our good works, to be praised for our kindness, to hear the words, "Look at what they've done." But the moment you seek the approval of men, you lose the reward of heaven. The moment your giving becomes about being seen, it is no longer a pure act of love. It becomes a transaction, an effort to gain something in return, whether that be admiration, gratitude, or validation. God sees what is done in secret. He sees the widow who gives her last 2 coins when no one else notices. He sees the man who feeds the hungry without taking a picture to prove it. He sees the woman who kneels in prayer for others in the quiet of her room where no one applauds her intercession. And it is these unseen acts of goodness that God rewards, because they are done out of love, not for attention. The world teaches us to announce our generosity, to let others know when we have done something noble, but the Word of God says the opposite. Jesus spoke clearly about this when he said, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." He warned against those who make a spectacle of their giving, who sound the trumpet before they offer charity, who ensure that others witness their kindness so that they may receive the applause of men. The problem is not in the act of giving itself. The problem is in the heart behind it. Is it given out of genuine love, or is it given for recognition? Is it done in humility, or is it done for personal elevation? The Pharisees in Jesus' day were known for putting on a show of righteousness. They would pray loudly in public places. They would fast in a way that made their suffering visible to others. And they would give to the poor in a manner that drew attention to themselves. But Jesus called them hypocrites. Their outward actions appeared holy, but their motives were corrupt. They did not do these things because they loved God or because they loved people. They did them so that others would admire them. And because they sought the praise of men, that was their only reward. They received the approval they longed for, but they forfeited the blessing of heaven. There is something sacred about doing good in secret, when no one knows but God, when no one sees but the one who matters most. Then your act of kindness remains pure. There is no pride in it, no self-exaltation, no ulterior motive, only love. That is why Jesus said, when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. In this world, people often give with conditions. They help, but they expect something in return. They donate, but they make sure their name is attached to the gift. They serve, but they want to be acknowledged for their service. And when that recognition does not come, they feel unappreciated, unnoticed, and even bitter. But true generosity seeks nothing in return. It does not demand thanks. It does not require an audience. It does not need validation, because its source is love. Look at the life of Jesus. He healed the sick. He fed the hungry. He washed the feet of his disciples. He gave everything, including his life. Yet he never did it for attention. In fact, there were times when he performed miracles and told people not to speak of it. He was not concerned with recognition. He was concerned with obedience to the Father. He gave because it was his nature to give. He loved because it was his nature to love. And he never sought the approval of men. When you do good, do not worry about whether people acknowledge it. There will be times when you will help someone and they will not thank you. There will be moments when you will give and no one will recognize the sacrifice you made. There will be times when you will pour yourself out for others, and instead of gratitude, you will receive criticism or indifference. But do not let that discourage you. You are not doing it for them, you are doing it for God. And He sees every act of love, every sacrifice, every moment of service, even when no one else does. There is a great danger in seeking the approval of men. The applause of people is temporary. One day they will praise you, and the next day they will forget you. If you build your life on the recognition of others, you will always be chasing after something that does not last. But when you live for the approval of God, when you give and serve and love without seeking attention, you are storing up treasures in heaven, where no thief can steal, no rust can destroy, and no applause is needed. Think of those who give but expect something in return. Think of those who serve, but only if there is a reward attached. Think of those who do good only when there is an audience watching. Their kindness is not real kindness, it is a performance. Their generosity is not true generosity, it is a strategy for self-promotion. And though they may gain recognition in this life, they lose the far greater reward that comes from God. The Bible tells us that God loves a cheerful giver. But a cheerful giver is not one who gives reluctantly, nor is it one who gives for show. A cheerful giver is one who gives out of joy, out of love, out of a heart that desires to bless others simply because it is the right thing to do. There is freedom in that kind of giving, freedom in knowing that you are not bound by the need for human approval, freedom in knowing that God is the one who rewards in ways far greater than man ever could. When you help the poor, do not seek attention. When you serve others, do not wait for praise. When you give, give because you love, not because you want something in return. And when no one notices, when no one thanks you, when no one acknowledges what you have done, remember this: God sees, and that is enough. Things number 3, your future plans in detail. Not everyone needs to know the plans God has placed in your heart. Not everyone will understand your vision, and not everyone will celebrate what God is doing in your life. Some will doubt you, some will discourage you, and some will even try to stop you. That is why you must be careful with what you share and who you share it with. The dreams and plans that God has given you are precious, and they must be guarded. There is a story in the Bible about a young man named Joseph. God gave him dreams of his future, dreams that showed him rising to a place of great authority. But Joseph made a mistake. He shared those dreams too soon. He told his brothers about them, and instead of rejoicing with him, they became jealous. Instead of supporting him, they hated him. Their jealousy grew until it consumed them, and they plotted against him. They threw him into a pit, sold him into slavery, and thought they had destroyed his future. Joseph had a great calling on his life, but because he spoke too soon, he faced betrayal from those closest to him. Not everyone can handle what God is doing in your life. Some people will smile to your face, but secretly hope you fail. Some will pretend to support you, but inside they are envious. Others may not mean harm, but they will speak words of doubt, discouraging you from stepping into what God has for you. If you listen to them, if you allow their negativity to take root in your heart, you may begin to doubt yourself. You may start to question whether you really heard from God. You may hesitate when you should move forward, and you may delay what God has called you to do. There is wisdom in moving in silence. When Nehemiah set out to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, he did not announce his plans to everyone. He inspected the city at night when no one was watching. He did not reveal his strategy until the time was right. Why? Because he knew that there would be opposition. He knew that there would be those who would try to stop the work. And when the opposition came, it came fiercely. There were people who mocked him, people who threatened him, people who tried to intimidate him into quitting. But because Nehemiah had been wise from the beginning, because he had guarded his plans and sought God's guidance, he was able to complete the work despite the attacks. When God gives you a vision, he does not always give it to those around you. He spoke to Noah about the flood, but the people around him did not believe. He called Abraham to a new land, but Abraham had to leave behind everything familiar to follow God's plan. He anointed David to be king, but David spent years running from Saul before he ever sat on the throne. In every case, the calling was real, but the journey required faith, patience, and wisdom. If you share your plans too soon, you may invite unnecessary battles. The enemy listens when you speak. He cannot read your mind, but he can hear your words. When you declare your dreams openly, you make yourself a target. The opposition will come, and if you are not prepared, it can shake your faith. That is why some things must remain between you and God until the right time. Silence is not secrecy, it is wisdom. There is a difference between hiding something out of fear and protecting something out of wisdom. When a farmer plants a seed, he does not dig it up every day to show others that it is growing. He leaves it buried, allowing it to take root in the dark. If he exposes it too soon, it will die before it has the chance to bear fruit. Your plans, your vision, your calling, they are like seed. They need time to grow before they can be revealed. Some people share their plans because they are excited. They want others to know what God is doing in their life. But excitement must be tempered with wisdom. Even Jesus understood this. There were times when he performed miracles and told people not to speak about them. He knew that not everyone was ready to hear, and he knew that premature exposure could bring opposition before the appointed time. There is a time for everything. A time to speak and a time to be silent, a time to act and a time to wait. When God gives you a plan, seek his timing. Ask him when to move and when to remain still. Do not rush ahead because of impatience. Do not seek approval from people when you already have the approval of God. And do not feel the need to explain yourself to those who will never understand. Some will question your path. They will ask why you are doing what you are doing. They will not see what you see, but that is because God did not give them the vision. He gave it to you. You do not need their permission to follow God's will. You do not need their understanding to obey his voice. When God called Moses to lead Israel out of Egypt, there were many who doubted him. There were those who complained, those who resisted, those who wanted to turn back. But Moses did not need their approval. He needed only to obey the one who sent him. Be careful who you allow to speak into your life. Some voices will strengthen your faith, but others will plant seeds of doubt. Some will push you closer to your calling, but others will pull you away. Do not share your plans with those who do not have the faith to believe with you. Do not seek encouragement from those who do not understand what God is doing in your life. Surround yourself with those who walk by faith, not by sight, and above all, keep your eyes on the one who called you. When the time is right, God will reveal what he has been doing in the hidden places. When Joseph was thrown into the pit, when he was sold into slavery, when he was falsely accused and imprisoned, it seemed like his dreams had been destroyed. But what others meant for evil, God used for good. When the appointed time came, Joseph was lifted out of the prison and placed in a position of power, and the very brothers who betrayed him had to come before him in need. If Joseph had allowed their jealousy to stop him, he would have never reached the palace. If he had doubted the dreams God gave him, he would have never fulfilled his purpose. But he trusted God, and in the end, everything happened just as God had shown him. You do not need to announce what God is doing in your life. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. You do not need to explain yourself to those who doubt you. The vision God has given you will speak for itself in time. Trust him, move in wisdom, and let him bring it to pass in his perfect timing. Things. Number 4, your private conversations with God. There are some things that should remain between you and God alone. Your private conversations with him, your prayers, your deepest thoughts, your struggles, your hopes, your fears. These are sacred moments that do not need to be shared with the world. In a time when people feel the need to announce everything, when personal experiences are broadcasted for all to see, there is something powerful about having a relationship with God that is not put on display for others. Prayer is not a performance. It is not meant to be a public demonstration of spirituality. It is an intimate exchange between you and your Creator, a direct line of communication that no one else needs to hear. Jesus himself warned against those who pray for the sake of being seen. He spoke of those who stand on the street corners, lifting their voices, not because they long for God, but because they long for the attention of people. They want to be admired for their devotion. They want others to see them as holy. But Jesus said that those who pray in such a way have already received their reward, the praise of men. True prayer happens in the secret place. Jesus said, when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. There is something profound about meeting God in the quiet, away from distractions, away from the noise of the world, away from the opinions of others. In that place, you can be honest. You can pour out your heart without fear of judgment. You can lay your burdens before him, knowing that he listens. There are prayers that no one else will ever hear. Prayers whispered in the middle of the night when sleep will not come. prayers cried out in moments of desperation when there is no one else to turn to, prayers offered in silence when words fail, but the heart still speaks. These are the prayers that shape a person's faith. These are the prayers that draw a soul closer to God. Not every prayer needs to be spoken aloud. God hears what is unspoken. He knows the thoughts before they are formed, the words before they are uttered, the cries of the heart before they are given a voice. Sometimes the most powerful prayers are the ones that never leave the lips, the silent prayers of a weary soul, the quiet surrender of a heart in need of God's presence. There is a reason Jesus often withdrew to solitary places to pray. Even though he was surrounded by people, even though he was constantly teaching, healing, and ministering to others, he knew the importance of being alone with the Father. He would rise early in the morning before the world awakened. He would go to the mountains, to the wilderness, to the quiet places where he could speak with God without interruption. If Jesus, the Son of God, needed that private time with the Father, how much more do we? There is nothing wrong with praying with others. There is power in agreement. There is strength in coming together as a community of faith. But there are some prayers that are meant for you and God alone. There are some struggles that are too personal to be shared with anyone else. There are some confessions that only He needs to hear. People will not always understand your prayers if you share too much. Some will judge. Some will criticize. Some will offer opinions that do more harm than good. Others may take what you share and use it against you. That is why wisdom is needed. That is why discernment is necessary. Not every conversation with God needs to be spoken of. Some things should remain between you and Him, guarded and protected from the influence of others. Think of Hannah, the mother of Samuel. She prayed in such deep anguish that the priest Eli thought she was drunk. But she was not speaking to man, she was speaking to God from the depths of her soul. She poured out her heart, weeping before Him, making a vow that no one else could understand. And God heard her. He answered her. He honored her private prayer. And through her, a great prophet was born. Think of David, the man after God's own heart. His prayers were raw, unfiltered, filled with emotion. He spoke of his fears, his failures, his longings, his love for God. Many of his prayers were recorded in the Psalms, but there were countless more that no one ever heard. There were moments when he was alone in the fields as a shepherd, singing to God with no one but the sheep to listen. There were times when he fled for his life, crying out to God in the caves where no one could hear. These were the prayers that sustained him. These were the prayers that deepened his faith. There is something about praying in solitude, something about having that personal connection with God that does not need to be shared or explained. Some of the most powerful moments with God happen in the quiet. It is in those moments that He speaks. It is in those moments that He strengthens, heals, restores, and gives direction. The world encourages people to speak, to share, to let others in on every aspect of their lives. But God calls His people to a different standard. There is a beauty in secrecy. There is a sacredness in private devotion. There is a strength that comes from knowing that your relationship with God is not dependent on public displays or the approval of others. When you have a secret history with God, when you have a private prayer life that is not for show, you develop a faith that cannot be shaken. You are not swayed by the opinions of people. You do not seek validation from others. You do not need applause for your devotion, because you know that God sees, you know that He hears, and you know that what happens in the secret place will be rewarded in ways far greater than human recognition. Some of the greatest moves of God begin in hidden places. Some of the most powerful testimonies are birthed in moments of private surrender. Some of the deepest transformations happen when no one is watching. This is why your private conversations with God matter. This is why your secret prayers are so important. They are the foundation of your faith. They are the lifeline of your spiritual journey. They are the moments that shape your destiny. Do not feel the need to share everything God is doing in your life. Do not feel pressured to make your prayers public. Guard your intimacy with Him. Treasure the moments that are just between you and your Father. Seek Him in the quiet, in the stillness, in the hidden places where only He can hear, because in those moments He is near. In those moments He speaks. In those moments He moves in ways that no one else may see, but that will change your life forever. Your relationship with God is personal. It is sacred. It is not meant to be displayed for the approval of others, nor is it meant to be explained to those who may not understand. Some things must remain between you and Him: your struggles, your prayers, your sacrifices, your dreams. What you share with God in secret is the foundation of your faith, the place where your trust in Him is built and strengthened. When you guard your private moments with God, you allow Him to shape you without interference. You give Him space to work in your heart, to speak to you, to refine you. The world may push for recognition, but God honors those who seek Him in humility and secrecy. The most powerful prayers are not always the loudest, and the most profound encounters with God often happen in the quiet places. Trust that what is spoken in secret will be answered in time. Trust that what is sown in private devotion will bear fruit in due season. And trust that the God who hears in the secret place is faithful to fulfill His promises. Walk with Him, seek Him, and cherish the moments that belong to you and Him alone.